Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I've got it going, and it says that the sound is working, so I'm gonna step out, shut the door,
Okay.
and if you need me, y'all just holler.
Okay. You can start, yes. Okay, so what is your last name?
Blattel,
Can you spell it?
Blattel.
Okay, first name
Andrew,
and middle initial.
L as in Lima,
Okay, what year were you born?
1979.
Okay. Where did you live when you became part of the military?
I was living here in Jefferson City, Missouri when I joined the Army.
If you graduated from high school, what high school did you graduate from and what year?
I graduated from Helias High School in 1997.
When you were in high school, did you ever believe that you would be a part of the military?
No,
Okay.
What branch of service were you part of?
I was in the Army.
Okay. How did they get in the service?
Well, at the time I enlisted, we were already involved in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I felt like I wanted to do my part. Also, I had recently gotten married, and I thought it would be a good way to support my family. They provided a good living. So I went and enlisted here in Jefferson City.
Where was basic?
Basic training was conducted at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Okay. It is said that in basic training the individual is broken and the serviceman is created. Would you agree with this?
Yes, definitely. That's the whole point in the first part of basic training is to tear you down so that they can build you back up into a soldier, and that's mostly emotional and mental, but also there's a substantial physical part to it.
What do you remember about basic training that you still remember today?
I remember the first time they took us out and we slept overnight outside, that all of the water in our canteens froze solid, so we didn't have water first thing in the morning. So obviously it was pretty cold sleeping out there on the ground that night.
How long does basic training last?
So for a cavalry scout, which is what I joined as, it's a two-part, what they call one station unit training. The first 8 weeks is your basic training. That's where they just teach you how to be a soldier, teach you how to shoot, teach you how to march, teach you how to wear your uniform. And then the second 8 weeks of the 16-week session is your AIT, or your advanced individual training, and that's where they teach you how to specifically be a cavalry scout as opposed to just a soldier.
What year did you finish basic training?
In 2004.
Okay. Basic training was over. Did you have a chance to go home or did you immediately move on to service?
Immediately on to service. My wife and my parents came down to see me at my graduation and were able to take me from Fort Knox to the airport. But at the airport, then I had to get on a plane and fly to Fort Benning, Georgia for airborne school. And then I went straight from Fort Benning, Georgia on to Fort Drum, New York.
Do you agree that you were put in the right position when you were sent on for advanced training? Just reading the question.
That's okay. Yes. So I was a cavalry scout, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and that was the position I volunteered for.
What
I signed up
exactly
for.
is that?
So cavalry scout, the basic combat MOS in the Army is an infantryman, and they're the actual foot soldiers that go out and try and fight the enemy. The cavalry scout has a similar job, but they get to ride around in vehicles, so they can cover more ground. They usually work in smaller, our platoons are much smaller than an infantry platoon. So I was doing reconnaissance, surveillance, and target acquisition when I was in Afghanistan. So my job was to go find the bad guys. We were very good at it. So I was a cavalry scout, and then my position, I got to be a squad leader very shortly after getting to my actual duty station at Fort Drum in New York.
Okay. What skills do you remember being taught during advanced training?
So advanced training, with a combat MOS like Cavalry Scout, your advanced training is very similar to your basic training. Your basic soldiering skills but you go into more detail. So you get very good at land navigation, orienteering with a compass and a map, and radio, because you have to, communications is your lifeline. So being able to set the security in the radio, set the right frequencies, knowing how to talk to the other people on the other end, so you can appropriately call for artillery fire or air support or medevac if that's the case. So communication skills, computer and radio operation skills, like I said, land navigation with compass and map. We did use GPS some, and basic marksmanship.
What was your job when you began military service?
Before I got into the Army, or what was I doing when I joined, or what was I doing when I started?
Probably specifically like when you got into it.
Okay,
the military.
so I was a cavalry scout, so that was my job. It's 19 Delta is what they call the MOS, or the military occupational specialty.
Where did you begin military service after advanced training?
So again, I went to airborne school at Fort Benning, but then my first duty station was actually Fort Drum, New York.
Mm-hmm.
What was happening in the world when you were in the military?
Well, as far as the U.S. was concerned, we were already well involved in Iraq and Afghanistan by 2004 whenever I joined. So that was the biggest driving factor.
From your time in the service, could you give 4 or 5 things that you remember vividly even today?
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. From basic training, I told you about the water freezing, but there's a lot of memories you have from basic training. Whenever you get to basic training, you get assigned a battle buddy, which is basically the guy that sleeps on the other bunk in your bunk beds, and you're supposed to help each other along throughout the whole process. And my battle buddy was a younger guy, and he couldn't hack it, so he actually quit and went home. So that was a little tough. I injured my shoulder at airborne school, so I obviously vividly remember that. And lots of time at Fort Drum, New York. Fort Drum, New York is located in a physically interesting location just off of the Great Lakes. So if you followed a weather pattern from west to east across the Great Lakes, and where it would make landfall, that's Fort Drum, New York. So it was called the snow belt, because all the clouds would move across and pick up precipitation and then dump right there. So it was not common to see 6 feet of snow in the wintertime, where you'd open up your door and you'd have to look up to see out. And training didn't stop there until it was below -20. So that was just common. You knew how to layer and wear cold weather. So we actually went to the range to qualify on our weapons at -20 one time. So a lot of the guys would have frostbite on the end of the nose from touching their weapons, or if you took your glove off to touch the magazine, to change magazines, you would get frostbite on your hands instantly. So just the cold at Fort Drum is very memorable. Lots of memories from Afghanistan, for being on the mountainsides and interacting with the people there. And of course my last one was injuring my knee, which is what ultimately got me medically retired out of the Army. So.
Okay. Can you remember any of the names of the people who you served with during your time of service?
Yes. Specifically David Allen Timmons, Brian Michael Moquin, and Justin Lee O'Donohoe were 3 of the guys in my squad that died while we were in Afghanistan. So I'll always remember those 3 names specifically. But there's lots of guys that I still hear from on Facebook or just randomly text message me a lot of times still.
What impression did they make on you?
O'Donohoe was my best friend while I was in the Army. He and I arrived at Fort Drum at about the same time for our initial duty station. We both had some college and some computer skill background, which was not the norm in the Cavalry Scout MOS. So we both got pulled into the office and made the office guys. So we had to report to the captain and the first sergeant and do all the paperwork. So we sat across the desk from each other every day, so we got to know each other very well. His thing was fencing, so a lot of times after work we'd stay and do fencing. He was trying to teach me how to fence. So yeah.
So I had a question, going back to when you said your friend dropped out, like at basic or
Mhm.
something, did that like impact you? Did it make you wanna like quit?
No, if anything, it just reinforced my desire to survive and complete myself. So,
And then your shoulder injury, did it like put you back in how like fast you needed to get done with stuff or whatnot?
so the injury to my shoulder was enough that I was not able to complete airborne training. So that actually changed the entire trajectory of my military career. Initially, I was gonna complete airborne school and then go to an assignment with the 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg. Since I wasn't airborne, then I got reassigned to Fort Drum, New York.
Do you think that was a good thing?
Yes, the operational tempo or deployment, the 82nd in Fort Bragg was higher than Fort Drum at the time. So I think I would have had multiple deployments with them versus the one I had at Fort Drum. Also, they got sent to do civil response for flooding and hurricanes down in New Orleans, and I think that would have been tough to see and deal with. Additionally, I think that like shaped my whole military career. How things happened at Fort Drum and some of the people I met there would influence my change in MOS and career path later on down the line. So,
Okay. How long did you serve?
almost 10 years.
So you said you had a knee injury.
Mhm.
What exactly all went down with that?
So, after I got back from Afghanistan, one of my friends was changing MOSs to another military occupational specialty called Prime Power, and was encouraging me to go as well. So I looked into it and ended up going as well. That does all facets of electrical, from the wall outlet all the way back to the generator making the electricity. And so one of the schools I got to go to as part of that was the utility lineman school, climbing utility poles to work on the electrical on the utility poles. And I fell off of one of those when I was at school for that, and tore 3 ligaments in my knee and fractured and tore up my patella. So it was a career-ending injury.
Okay. If you served during time of war, what engagements can you remember?
I was in Afghanistan for 16 months, from 2006 to 2007, from February of 2006 to June of 2007, and had multiple engagements there. One that I always remember is Tanar. Was the first time I was engaged in active combat in Afghanistan. It was just 2 trucks, my squad, and from my platoon that were out roving one night, and we got engaged at night when it was dark, and it was kind of a surprise, and you have to react and use your training.
What do you remember most about your time in service?
Probably the people I met, the friends I made, a lot of the training and skills that I picked up that has got me where I am now. The change in MOS to Prime Power directly resulted in me having the job I do today at a nuclear power plant.
What qualities did you believe you carried from the military to where you are today?
Attention to detail is the biggest key. Just little things that you don't pick up on or pay attention on that you won't necessarily notice in everyday life as a high school student or a college student, but they drill into you, and it could be a life and death thing when you're in the Army. So I think that's one of the biggest keys. I think I learned very early on in basic training that if you showed up at the right place, at the right time, in the right uniform, you would do very well. So, just little things.
Do you remember anything else from service?
There was a lot of fun times too. Getting to use the weapon systems we did was a lot of fun, and shooting a 50 caliber machine gun, which was my personally assigned weapon when I was in Afghanistan. A Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher. We did the Bradley fighting vehicles when I was in basic AIT at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and it's a lot of fun. It's a armored personnel carrier, armored fighting vehicle. That was a lot of fun. Just some of the little things we did while we were in Afghanistan. Whenever we were at Combat Outpost Keating, there was an observation post above it called OP Warhite, where we would stay for rotations, and we were there from Thanksgiving to just after New Year's for one of our rotations. So we bought a cow from the locals and actually butchered and barbecued ourselves, and my family sent me barbecue sauce in the mail, so we were able to actually grill and barbecue, made our own homemade grill there, and so we did some interesting things, had some good times.
Okay. Do you ever get back together with the people you served with?
I don't. Geographically, it's difficult. My duty stations were all on the East Coast. I spent 4 years at Fort Drum, New York, 1 year at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C., and just about 5 years at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So geographically pretty far removed from that location. And so one of the guys that I served with is stationed at Fort Hood in Texas now. I talk to him fairly regularly on text message, but that's about the closest I get to any of the guys I served with.
So you said your family sent you stuff. Like, how much contact did you get to have with them?
That depended upon where we were stationed at. When I was in Afghanistan in the cavalry, we were very mobile. We'd move around frequently, and we were never usually stationed at the larger bases where access to communications and mail was frequent or regular. So most of the times I could get mail in about a 2-week stretch from the time they sent it until the time I received it. But there was 2 stretches while I was there where it was 45 days between where I was able to make phone calls home and talk to people. Of course, during those 2 45-day stretches, we also didn't get showers, but that was another story.
Question or no? Okay. Did you get to go on any leave while you were?
I did. I did get 2 weeks of leave while I was in Afghanistan, so that was excellent. I got to come home around my anniversary for 2 weeks, and then the Army actually paid to fly me home and let me have my 2 weeks vacation, and then flew me right back.
So what all did you do on leave? Like, was it different?
It was. You don't. You get used to not having things, so whenever you're able to eat whatever you want, whenever you want, and your time is your own, you're able to go wherever you want to go, whenever you want to go, is kind of strange. It was harder coming home after the tour than it was on leave. I came home in late June, so 4th of July was right after we came home, and just the fireworks and the loud explosions and the unexpected noises was very difficult to adjust to. So, and it took a while for that to go away, but so things are different.
Where all did you travel while you were like in service?
Well, I was a cavalry scout. I went to Afghanistan. We went there via Kyrgyzstan, so we spent a little while in Kyrgyzstan, and then all over Afghanistan, mostly the eastern side of the country along the Pakistan border, but also spent quite a bit of time down south in the Helmand province. After I was done being a cavalry scout, when I was prime power, we traveled the east coast around North Carolina, Virginia, and up into Pennsylvania. There was an Army depot there called Tobyhanna Army Depot, where they did reconditioning, and we would actually go up there and do the substation maintenance for them there. So that was a lot of fun. The Poconos are really pretty.
Did you feel pressure or like stress while you were in service?
Yeah, there's always stress associated with it. A lot of that is situational related. When you're in Afghanistan, when you never know exactly what's going to happen or where you're going to be sent, or stateside it's more has to do with your leadership and who's giving you orders and what they're asking of you, and then ensuring you get as much family time as you can, because your time belongs to the Army.
So as you spent time with the guys, did you guys do any pranks or have any like jokes with each other?
Yes, all kinds of stuff we would do to tease each other or catch each other unaware. A lot of stuff that would be considered inappropriate, but
Okay, what was the food like?
again, that while you're stateside, the chow halls or mess halls are pretty decent. The food's pretty good. Their breakfast, especially, is very good and very reasonably priced as well. And then, of course, you can usually go off post and go to, Burger King, McDonald's, whatever's around there. And there's some of those on post as well. Lots of Dunkin' Donuts on posts. But in Afghanistan, obviously, it was very limited. If you were on one of the major posts, like Bagram Air Force Base or Kandahar, they did have a couple of, I know Bagram had a Burger King and a Subway and a Dairy Queen while I was there. Kandahar had a Tim Hortons, which is a Canadian or northern coffee and donut shop. And then they also had standard chow halls and mess halls, but once we got away from those, for the most part it was MREs or meals ready to eat, which is just a prepackaged meal that you have to heat and eat, and they look and smell and taste kind of similar to on whatever it is. And then again, we bought a cow once, we bought goats twice, and made our own food. With the later stages, they did bring in a heat and eat station where they have pre-bagged food which they can boil in water and heat up and serve, kind of like a chow hall, and it's better than MREs, but it's still not homemade food. So the best we would have is care packages I'd get from home, and you have Girl Scout cookies and beef jerky and all that kind of stuff. So
How did you guys entertain yourselves, like while you weren't working?
most of us would have small electronics, like PlayStation Portable was the big thing then, or we had a board game that we would play together, and I think it was called Heroescape. It was just little figurines, and you roll dice and take turns and attack and defend and strategy, and so playing cards, playing games. That was the majority of it.
When you worked, did you work like a regular job, like 8 to 5 or whatever? Or?
So when I was in Afghanistan, there was no set schedule. It was just always available. The later half of the tour, after my friends died, I was in the TOC, the Operations Control Center, and myself and one other guy would work 12 on, 12 off. I had the day shift, he had the night shift. So we just worked 12 on, 12 off for the last month or so while we were there. You don't have any days off. When you're stateside, yeah, it's almost like a normal job. You work like 6:30 to 4:30 every day, or Monday through Friday, and then weekends off unless you're doing a camp out. You go to the field, and then you can go over weekends, overnights, but it's really up to their discretion. Like I said, you belong to the Army at that point, so.
Okay, back to the care packages. Was it like, when you got them, was it just you receiving it, or did you like share with the other guys?
It's like Christmas or a birthday. Every time anybody would get a care package, you'd open it up, take your favorites out, and then share with the guys. So everybody benefited from care packages. So, and one individual getting a care package may cheer up the whole platoon, because everybody usually gets a little bit of something out of it. Even if, I pulled out a box of Girl Scout cookies, and it's my favorite, I'm not going to eat the whole box. I'm going to share some with the other guys. So care packages were a big deal.
Were you ever like sent anything and like one guy took it and it was kind of like, maybe like you kind of wanted it?
Whenever we were on up on the outpost, you would leave the mass majority of your stuff behind because it was only what you could carry, and you had to climb a mountain to get there, so you didn't carry very much. So a lot of times guys would get into your stuff while you were gone, and it's just it happened. You just kind of accepted it. So.
Did you do anything for good luck or like keep you kind of like sane?
You get into routines, kind of. It kind of helps you pass the time. It kind of helps you keep your sanity. There was always certain songs that we would play when we were getting ready to roll out of the gate on a mission, and that would kind of get you amped up and ready to go for whatever you were gonna encounter while you were out.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
I got a few. I didn't bring my DD-214 with me for
What
all
exactly
of
is that?
them. DD-214 is your military record, your record of service. So I got a few. I had a combat action badge, is that one that was for, well, for me it was being in direct combat. So that first battle I got in Tanagra, I received that. But then I saw combat several more times throughout. Yeah, I got a meritorious unit service award. I got Army Commendation, Army Achievement Medal, and multiples of both of those. Good Conduct Medals, the International Security Assistance Forces, a NATO Medal for Afghanistan, the Global War on Terrorism Medal, and a few others.
So you said you saw combat. Can you talk about what that was like for you?
It's kind of a gut check. You do all of the training and basic training and AIT for it, but you know the whole time that nobody is really going to shoot you while you're in training. So the first time someone shoots at you, you can either duck and curl up in a ball, or you can shoot back, and they're not going to stop unless you shoot back. So it's just a gut check you have to deal with, but once it's happening, then you don't really have time to think, you just react.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
I don't know the exact day. It was July of 2013. Actually, I had some leave saved up, so I wasn't officially out of the Army until the end of August in 2013. So.
Where were you?
I was at Fort Bragg, New York, whenever I got out. I got out or I finished there on a Monday. I drove across the country on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday I started a job at Tulsa, Oklahoma.
So you said you graduated from high school?
Mhm.
Did you go back to college when you came back?
While I was in, actually, once I hurt my knee, I knew that I was going to be out for a while. The Army does, whenever you have a major surgery like that, they'll do a surgery followed by 6 months of physical therapy before you're allowed to have another surgery. And I had 4 surgeries over the course of 2 years, so I knew I was going to be physically unable to perform my job for a while. I had already spent 2 years at college at the University of Missouri before I went into the Army, so I had some college background. So while I was laid up then, I finished out my bachelor's degree while I was in the Army, so whenever I got out I had my bachelor's degree.
Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
I did not use the GI Bill. I still have it available to me now. Since I was on active duty, they actually paid for all of my education at the time.
So do you think being in the military changed what you became to do after it?
Absolutely. When I was growing up, I always thought my plan would be to be a veterinarian. I'd never thought about doing electrical work. Didn't even know what a meter and relay technician was until I went into the prime power in the Army. And then when I learned it and I enjoyed it and I was fairly good at it, then that definitely drove my career, and that's what I'm doing now still.
Did you join a veterans organization?
I have not joined any of the veterans organizations.
Is there anything you'd like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
There's a couple of pieces, if you're looking for more information. Jake Tapper actually wrote a book about us while we were in Afghanistan. If I can find it now. Yeah, here we go. Called The Outpost.
Okay.
So it's actually 3 sections, starting with my platoon when we were at Combat Outpost Keating. At the time it wasn't called Combat Outpost Keating. My XO, my executive officer, is the second in charge of our company, or our troop since we're cavalry. Ben Keating was killed while we were in Afghanistan, so they renamed our post after him. I had to be the casket bearer to actually carry him and put him on the plane to send him home to his family, so that was a little rough. And and I worked with him every day, and he was a good guy, so that was tough. But so Combat Outpost Keating was named after him. He was posthumously promoted to captain. He was a lieutenant at the time. So Combat Outpost Keating was a cornfield in the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan when we got there, and we built it up into a combat outpost, and then another group came in and relieved us after our tour was over, and another group came in and relieved them. That third group that came in relieved us. They had one of the biggest battles of the war in Afghanistan, had multiple casualties and multiple Medal of Honor winners come out of it. But the premise of his book is what we said whenever we got there, and is that the base never should have been there. It was the base of 3 mountains. So you have the low ground where everybody's looking down onto you the whole time. We knew while we were there that they were observing us, because we would go up the mountains routinely and knock down fighting positions they had set up, take away ammo caches they had left behind. So we knew they were watching us the whole time, and it was a horrible place strategically to put a base. But that was not our call. Additionally, there's one YouTube video out there one of the guys from another platoon and Mark Troop made called War and What Is It Good For, and just shows some of the stuff we went through while we were over there, some of the actions we had. It was very interesting.
Does the war, or like when you served, does it affect you still to this day?
I would say I certainly had some PTSD whenever I came back. It took a while, and I'd say I'm fairly well adjusted to it, and have been for a while. Took a lot of support from my family and from my wife to deal with that, but I don't think it adversely affects me anymore. It's life experience that you wouldn't trade for anything once you made it through, especially losing some guys over there. So if anything, I think it just drives me to try and be a better person.
Okay, well, I think that is time. Thank you for letting us interview you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mr. Emil,
Yep.
we're done.
All finished?
Yes,
Excellent.
but I didn't turn it off because I didn't know.
That's okay. I can take it.
Okay, thank you.
They talk you out?
Not at all.
Okay.